All right, Nate, the burning question from viewers is Ford's 10-speed better than General Motors 10-speed, at least in the valve body? Nate's here from NextGen. He's the engineer, head guy at NextGen. By the way, everybody should throw Nate some love in the comments because we're recording this on a Sunday afternoon and he could be fishing instead of educating us on transmissions. Nate, where do you want to start? Nate sent a bunch of images. This is a smattering of images of valve bodies and valves that we're going to go through that Nate sent over. Where do you want to start with Ford versus GM? Do you want to talk about just kind of high level, whether or not you think they're better in any way?
Well, we can start with high level and then maybe get into some of the pictures. So I want everybody who hears what I have to say to be the most informed people in the automotive industry. That's important to me. And it's important that that happens for free. So I'm going to do that today and educate on the Ford 10-speed, all of the billet steel valves and all that good stuff, pulse delete, all that, everything you see in the aftermarket with names like that. I invented all of that. So I know more about the Ford 10-speed than anybody I've met at Ford. And if somebody feels differently, they should come debate me about it.
So is this the original issue that occurred up until like 2023 with the Fords?
So this is the outer drive shell or F shell. It's actually not the CDF drum, I'll go into detail. So the main issue with the CDF drum is an assembly that holds 3 of the 6 clutch packs inside the transmission. And it was having a problem where the bushing inside was getting pushed out of place. And the reason this was a uniquely significant problem is because this bushing has holes in it that the oil travels through to turn those clutches on and off. And those holes in the bushing would now no longer line up with the holes in the drum when the bushing would travel. And the result would be that the computer is now trying to adjust clutch activation timing and adaptive learning around improper oil flow to quite literally half the clutches in the transmission. And so Ford came out with an updated drum that has a little lip cast into the drum so that the bushing has something stopping it to prevent that from happening. Now, before that existed, a couple of people had figured out solutions. What we were doing is we were taking a lathe and a square cutting tool, and we were cutting a little square, 2 millimeter square, a certain distance into the shell, or excuse me, the drum. And we would put a snap ring in there, which achieved the same outcome. But the Ford updated drum is so cheaply for sale. It's about $100 wholesale price. So there was no need to continue manufacturing our own because Ford was selling an updated one that achieved the same outcome. What you're seeing here is called the outer drive shell. And it's one of the biggest problems in all of the Ford and GM 10-speeds, all of them. What you're seeing here is one that physically snapped. And I forget the backstory on this one. I think this was an F-150 Coyote that had like 1,500 horsepower or something, and it just clean snapped it. This is an extremely uncommon type of failure. The drum usually gets worn out, not by physically snapping. That's a crazy performance thing more than anything. The way that this drum usually fails is you get downshift clunks and weird shift behavior because of valve body issues that cause the teeth inside this drum to get damaged. And so this is the reason that I tell people that the number one thing you can do to keep your transmission on the road is a complete and comprehensive upgrade to the valve body, because nearly everybody who experiences that issue is experiencing a valve body problem that's causing the clutches to turn on at inappropriate times, or to not shift correctly, or to time incorrectly. And it causes these teeth to get damaged, and the clutches can get stuck in these teeth, and it results in significant shift complaints. And the real issue is that once this starts to happen, doing a valve body upgrade can't save you anymore. So it's very important that people perform preventative maintenance on these transmissions, especially when you're talking about transmissions that are $8,000 to $10,000 just for the gearbox from the dealership retail price.
Okay. So this is uncommon. We'll move on to, I mean, that's probably related to the 1,500 horsepower thing. Most likely. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So nearly all of them fail, just not like that. Okay. So that was what I was trying to communicate. This is a crazy common problem, but instead of snapping, usually what happens is the teeth inside get damaged. That's what I was explaining. Okay. And that is almost always caused by hard shifts, rough downshifts, things associated with valve body failure. What people are seeing here is a part that's usually damaged downstream from ignoring a valve body problem.
Okay. Explain, I guess, separator plates have been a big topic of yours. Explain what we're looking at here, I guess.
Sure. So a lot of people say, how's the 10R80 and 10L80 different? Well, you can see the separator plates on the top left and top right of this image. They're pretty much identical. In fact, I think you could probably swap them and it would work as long as you had the right valve body. But don't quote me on that. I've never tested that. They're sharing a lot of mutual intellectual property here. Now, on the bottom left, you see ours. It's all shiny and zinc coated. That's why it looks that way. But what you can't see in the picture is they're about 3 times as thick. And we also eliminate any circuit that doesn't need to be there. And this causes a lot of bore wear in the factory separator plates when they try to pulse valves or cycle oil through valves that aren't needed. So for example, we deleted the line pressure control piston. We designed a separator plate where oil can't go into that portion of the valve body. And now that piston, which is an extreme failure point, it can't wear out. It's deleted. We're the only people on the market that have designed a permanent solution to that piston, and it's by removing it from the valve body. It's no different than removing an EGR cooler from a diesel truck. If you keep having to replace EGRs, why not just delete it?
I have a question about the black, black kind of whatever it is on top of that paper stuff on top of the GM side, the 10L80. Is that ever so slightly worse than Ford's? Or because I see in the Facebook groups, I've seen technicians coming back and saying that that's a huge problem and it just peels and
yes.
rips.
Well, Ford uses the same garbage. Now, the 10R100 and 10R140 use what is more similar to who they're copying, which is ZF. And they use a silica bonding, a bead is what you call it, on the separator plate. And I think there's a picture of that in the gallery as well. Now, the issue with the paper is the paper comes off. It rips off and then it goes everywhere. And that can be another big problem because especially where check balls sit, check balls are usually under a lot of concentrated pressure because of their shape. And obviously it's a transmission. And they can also rip paper off of these things as they try to travel back and forth. It's very important that these separator plates don't use paper. It's a reliability concern, and that's the reason that every separator plate I've ever invented was designed to work without paper gaskets and seal better than paper gaskets.
So is this is the 10L1000? What's the difference between this one and the
barely anything?
Okay,
barely anything. That was the reason I included it. Now it's slightly larger in terms of footprint, but it's otherwise almost identical. It's the same sort of stuff. They moved some of the holes to different places, but it's all of the same stuff. The only major difference is the Allison uses the feed limit valve system, which is garbage, and Ford uses, by contrast, a latch valve system, which is also garbage.
Okay. Yeah, on the Ford side. So these are OEM Ford shift valves?
Yes, correct.
Do the GMs have those little rings in them? Or am I not remembering? Okay.
Yeah, they do. So the General Motors one, the design is exactly the same. The only difference is some of the dimensions for some of the lands. They're slightly wider at the end and stuff like that, but they're the same valves and they're used the same way. The other thing is the Allison does not use any of the 5-land valves. They're all 4-land valves. The 10L80 stopped using the 5-land valves after 2019, where they transitioned to the Generation 2 10L80 valve body. But the design is the same. These things warp, the anodization comes off. You have oil pressure that then exits the circuit. And this can cause a condition where people get downshift clunks or a flare and then bang when they're on upshifts under load. That's why I designed steel ones that are larger down the center. This is something we're applying for patent on here shortly. We have precedence in use, so we're going to be protecting this IP right here. We made the centerpieces wider so that they wouldn't be able to deflect over time. And so that was an important upgrade for these things. We had tested them with seals on them, and although it worked pretty well, the concern is that some people are modifying their vehicles, and when you modify the software and you alter pressure, it alters how much force can actually turn these off. And so there were some limitations in tuning that we would discover on heavily modified vehicles or vehicles that had complicated TCM tunes. And we wanted to make sure this product worked for everybody. And so we designed them without seals because The seals really weren't the problem here. It wasn't the bore that wears down, it's the valve that wears down in this portion of the valve body. And that's why you see a lot of these valves that come out with the anodization physically ripped off the valve due to abrasive force. And that's why billet steel valves are so important in this part of the valve body. I'm the only person who has invented these. And like I said, this is our proprietary product. I want everyone to take note of something that has nothing to do with us. The transmission industry has a history of lying to people all the time. And one thing that people lie about, if not the biggest thing, is saying that something is proprietary or a trade secret because they don't want to show you what they're doing internally. Usually, this is because they're not doing anything internally. They're just lying to you and false advertising. And one of my biggest pieces of advice to people is, and do this to us too, don't let anybody lie to you. Do this to us. We'll pass the test because we're being honest. Make sure they send you pictures of what they're actually upgrading and also ask for the old parts back. You're entitled to both of those things. Well, the most common line of defense people use is, oh, well, that's proprietary. It's a trade secret. I know all of these people personally. I know every almost every transmission executive personally. And I don't talk to them. I'm not on good talking terms with these people because they're liars, and you guys know who you are. There's nothing proprietary about your product. If there was, you'd be showing people like we do. You should stop lying to consumers. You're every bit as bad as Ford and GM.
Is this going back to the check ball thing? Is this a blown hole from a ball?
No. So this is So this looks like a 10R80 or 10L80 TCC dampener piston. And so what this is it's designed to cushion the application of the converter clutch. So there's another clutch inside the torque converter itself. And this piston right here is designed to slow down application of that clutch so that people can't really detect it. The issue is that it's one of the first things that wears out, and the vehicle runs better without it. You don't need dampening on the way to this converter clutch. I don't think that's necessary at all, because if you delete the piston, you can't even tell. It's not necessary. It's just something that triggers converter shudder to take place. A lot of people who are experiencing a shuddering sensation under certain conditions with these 10-speed Ford and GM vehicles, they actually have a leak at this portion of the valve body. We have a delete kit for this that's included with our valve body kit that I designed. We are the only people with a permanent solution to the converter shudder issue. And part of that solution is permanently eliminating that orifice from the valve body.
Okay. When you were talking about the valves, so are the OEM valves steel? They're just like cheaper? No.
How do aluminum.
So I was looking at this, and for those of you that don't know, I'm assuming that the engineers that design these valve bodies, all these passages, I'm assuming that like every passage, the width, the curves it takes, everything is designed to have a specific hydraulic pressure, and the distance has to be very perfectly engineered, right? And then the weight of the valves must affect that. How the heck did you design your valves to compensate? Like, can they be slightly heavier and still work, or how does that work from the engineering perspective of the new valves?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. It's a common question. So keep in mind, I've designed things with worm tracks myself, like, for example, the 8L90 pulse delete kit with that billet plate. I'm used to designing things like this. So I know how much I can get away with because I've done this on God knows how many transmissions at this point over the past decade. I know exactly. I invent these things from scratch, including the parts with the worm tracks. I know how much you can alter things before something bad happens. Part of what I do is I understand how the software works, so I know what I can do without the software getting upset about it. And that's something that the transmission industry has lost in recent years. All of the people that do what I do and design parts are, for the most part, older. In fact, they're almost exclusively older. Nearly all of them have retired. Some have even passed away. There are very few people in the United States doing what I do anymore, almost none. The remainder of people designing transmission parts are in India. Nearly everything you see in the automotive industry for transmissions comes from India and China. In fact, most people who are saying made in America, it's not made in America, it's made in India or China. but it undergoes some sort of final process here, like lasering their name on it, or repackaging it, or adding product to it, pamphlet or something, and then they can legally say that it's made in the United States. Nearly everything in the transmission industry is made in India or China. There's almost nothing made in the United States. People that are telling you that things are made in the USA, 99% of the time are lying. Not 100%, but 99%.
Yeah, I see that it's a big problem in the solar industry, everything else. It's like always the same thing. They're getting all this stuff manufactured somewhere else and then assembling it in the US. And it's very, very uncommon to see anything designed and made here.
Just so people know.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, so everything from the raw metal to the finished product happens at our building. So we're actually made in America. And, it's frustrating that we need to compete with people who lie and say that their stuff's made in America. This industry runs on lies. And I challenge anybody who is a consumer, especially in the transmission industry, to make people A, send you their old parts back, your old parts back, and B, demand pictures of the upgrades you're paying for. Those are the two most important things you can do. I'm not going to name drop who's lying and who's not. I really want to, but that would cause more problems than I would be responsible to put myself through. But just mark my words. Ask for your old parts back. Ask for pictures of what's being upgraded. Do not let them tell you it's proprietary, because everything you're seeing right now is proprietary, and they can't do anything about it because I own my intellectual property. Proprietary is a lie, and trade secrets is a lie. Don't fall for it.
You made me think of something I saw. I see questions like this in the viewer comments all the time, and they say, well, if I upgrade to NextGen when I get a brand new truck, what's going to happen if my transmission fails and then I go into the dealer and they tear it apart? I started thinking about a solution to that, and tell me if this is crazy or not. But if I get my own parts back, so let's say I bought a new truck, I buy the NextGen upgrade kit, I have my old valves. If I do it on my own, or whether I have a transmission shop do it, I should be able to get my old OEM stuff, right, and just put it in a bag. In theory, like the 1 or 2% chance that I end up having a transmission problem, could I then just put the OEM parts back in and refill it with ULV fluid and take it in and say, hey, this thing's borked?
Well, you absolutely could. I don't know about the whole legal end of that. If they would say that you're defrauding the warranty system or something. I mean, you know how OEMs are. They'll invent any sort of reason to not give you what you're entitled to. So
yeah,
I don't put anything past them. From a mechanical perspective, there's no reason you can't do that. And that's strictly a mechanical perspective. Now, they're going to say, oh, you tampered with it or something. Look, the reality is that if you didn't tamper with it, it would have failed in half the time. So I really don't know what that's supposed to mean. But that's just my own opinion.
What are we looking at here? Is this the Ford valve body?
It's either that or an early 10L80. They look nearly identical, but in short,
okay.
yes. You have your 6 linear solenoids on the back. The 10R100 and 10R140 have 7. The 10R140 does not have a TCC regulator valve, and it doesn't have a lockup control solenoid. The lockup control solenoid was replaced with a 7th linear solenoid, such as you see here. This is why the 10R100 and 10R140 have the blue solenoid, but not the green solenoid, and the 10R80, 10L80, and 10-speed Allison have both the blue and the green solenoid. The green solenoid is serving the purpose of one of those linear solenoids on the end of the valve body.
And you sent this. So these are your new valves
Yes.
and a Ford valve body.
These are billet steel valves and a Ford valve body, correct?
Okay. And these are the old OEM, versus your new valves. Okay.
So just so you know, we guarantee these valves for life. They'll never wear out. We've been around for a decade and we've had lifetime warranties on valve bodies since day one. I would encourage anybody, consider the difference, study the difference, educate yourself. Don't take my word for it. Don't just trust some guy on YouTube. Look into things independently. The reason I designed these valves is because this is one of the most common cause of the P2700 complex codes and the P0720 and 30 complex codes, which encompass a bunch of solenoid stuck off, stuck on performance sort of jargon. Many of those codes can be traced to these valves wearing down and eroding, and then pressure exiting those valves at inappropriate volume, an inappropriate volume, and that causes these valves to not move in the right amount of time. And when the computer is monitoring shift time and it sees that the shift took too long to execute, that'll usually trigger the computer to index a code associated with that condition. And these valves prevent that.
What was this? You sent this along as well.
So this is a priority valve. This one looks like it's out of a 10R140 or a 10R100. The 10R60, 80, and 90 priority valve looks identical. It's just a hair shorter. I believe this is the heavy duty one, the 100 and 140. Now, once again, this is a billet steel smooth bore valve. The factory gave you aluminum ribbed valves that are designed to wear the bore out prematurely. The reason that this is important to upgrade is this valve prevents the transmission from melting down when there's a conflict of line pressure. So whenever you have too much pressure or too little pressure going somewhere, if it reaches a point where the transmission software believes that it is likely to experience a meltdown, the pressure that is responsible for moving this valve will send that oil through lubrication and the converter instead of prioritizing it for net apply pressure, which is turning the clutches on and off. That's what this does. It's chamfered on one of the lands so that it barely has to move in order for oil flow to take place. It's a common leak point, and it's important that people have a steel one. I've seen a couple on the market that are this Junko factory material, and they just come with a sleeve or something. The sleeves just wear out. The sleeves are weaker than the factory casting in most cases. That's not a solution to the problem. The other thing is that the sleeve doesn't correct bore wear most of the time, because bore wear usually happens in an egg shape. And so what's happening is if you put a sleeve in there, it's leaking around the sleeve because it did not wear in a perfect circle. So sleeves are not a reliable way to fix problems in transmissions. I understand in the engine community they can be. In the transmission world, they don't do anything 99% of the time.
And what's this little valve?
This is a compensator feed valve. This is basically the opposite of line pressure. This is the pressure that sits behind the apply pistons to turn them back into the off position. This travels through the lubrication circuit of the transmission. In fact, this is part of why the Ford 10R140 and 10R100 don't have a lube regulator valve, is they use the compensator feed valve, which is almost the same thing. They wear out very, very quickly. Once again, we designed the only billet steel one in the industry. It's got multiple seals on it. And then in addition to that, you get a recalibration spring that brings this pressure up. This helps time clutch deactivation better. This also prevents wear in this portion of the valve body for life. Once again, we guarantee this valve for life because we guarantee everything that we sell for life. So yeah, that's what it does.
Does this normally have O-rings on it? Is that what those little...
No. Well, from the factory, no. From us, yes. Yeah, they get the Buna nitrile hydrometer O-rings. They're specifically designed for bore movement, high temperatures, oil submersion. They're specifically designed for that. And once again, we warranty the rings for life as well. You're never going to have a ring issue. We guarantee it. The only time anyone's ever called us for rings is if they lost one or they accidentally ripped one trying to force something in or something. Nobody ever calls us because their rings wore out. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, I see that as people always have that concern. It's kind of a natural concern anytime you see rubber. Everybody thinks of what, they can't even get their hose to seal up water on their house for a year with rubber, but it's kind of a different application here, different quality of rubber too.
Well, here's what I would say to that. So one, we guarantee them for life, like I said. So there's really nothing more we can do to prove that that is simply not the case. But here's the other thing. If the factory gave you seals and we were selling valves where we delete all the seals, would you believe that's an upgrade? Wouldn't you think, don't the seals need to be there for something? So they do need to be there for something. That's why our valves have lifetime warranties, and Ford and General Motors can't do that because they know their valves wear out over time, and our billet steel sealed off valves don't do that. So once again, these products have demonstrated themselves for the past decade. We believe in them wholeheartedly, and that's why we guarantee them for life with no mileage or power limitations.
With the ribs on the factory valves, each little rib, is it designed to try to compensate for when they start wearing? Is that why they put those in there? Why do they put the ribs in?
Well, I'll tell you what engineers say it's for, and then I'll tell you what it's actually for, in my opinion. So engineers would tell you that they are quote unquote cleaning lands, and they're supposed to capture material and help it travel throughout the bore without eroding the bore. The issue is that this is fake news. This is automotive industry propaganda, and it's completely untrue. We've tested this so many times, it's ridiculous. Every time you compare smoothbore valves to valves that have cleaning lands, you will see that the smoothbore valves survive longer in every application. It's simply untrue. They're trying to exacerbate bore wear. They're trying to make bore wear happen quicker. In my opinion, it's planned obsolescence. I designed all of our valves to be smoothbore to minimize friction. Friction is one of the greatest causes of bore erosion. Anybody that told you these are cleaning lands either doesn't know what they're talking about or they're just lying to you to sell you something.
I saw something in this image. Is that a hole? It
Oh.
looks like a black, like a crack. Are they hollow?
No. So
Okay.
what you're seeing is a mill cut that's used to
Oh, okay.
yeah, so when the valve is in the closed position, a tiny bit of oil can still backflow out of the clutch pack, and that's what those do. If you look closer, ours actually have the same feature. It's a
Okay.
milling operation. So when we manufacture ours, we have live tooling that travels over the guide bushing of the lathe and then comes down and adds that cut. That's a backflow exhaust cut. That's what they're doing. We're testing if that's even necessary right now. So far, it does not appear to be necessary, but out of an abundance of caution, we manufacture them with that same exhaust system built into the valve.
You sent this one over too. What are we looking at here?
This looks like a Lincoln Navigator. So if you look on the left, you'll see a manual valve. Ford 10R80s almost never have that. When they have the manual valve, they have something called a manual valve position sensor, I believe is what they call it. That's what I'm going to call it. And it's a black piece over the valve body that looks for where that valve is located. This is part of the parked by wire system. So this is the same system that's come under lots of scrutiny. A lot of people have concerns about them popping out of park and things like that. That's one of the major design flaws with this transmission is that if anything goes wrong, there are multiple different ways for this transmission to move when it's not supposed to move, such as, the E-clutch is warping and they sit right on the input shaft. So they try to move the vehicle forward. If they warp and they end up having physical contact with any amount of pressure behind them, even if you're in park, things like that. These vehicles have some pretty radical safety issues, in my opinion. That's why when I redesigned this valve body, safety, ease of use, low cost of lifetime maintenance, and frankly, just bomb-proof reliability were my biggest priorities.
Yeah, I asked you before we started recording here. I was incorrectly, I think, assuming that maybe Fords were more reliable than General Motors, and maybe I was thinking it was just due to some of these separator plate differences. But you were telling me that it's more about supply. You want to describe why you think that they're maybe similar as far as failure rate? It's just Ford's better at supplying the backups.
Yeah, I absolutely can. So a lot of people have been telling us, well, is the Ford better? And then, the Ford guys who are in the crapper are obviously like, well, is the GM better? And there's a lot of that back and forth. I think some people think the Ford is better because they hear about less trauma with it. Obviously, there's still crazy issues, but it doesn't seem to be as rampant. Well, the reason I disagree with that is because Ford can get you a valve body in a week usually. General Motors, for the most part, cannot do that. And so we hear about a lot of crises where people's businesses are down and they need loaner vehicles. That's the stuff we hear about from GM. And so I think it artificially makes the GM problems sound like they're more common when in reality, there's just louder voices behind them. The Ford 10R80 is no more reliable. We do sell slightly more parts for the GM. I'd say significantly more. But again, that's because thousands of people on the GM side are actively down and calling us for parts because they can't get anywhere. Whereas on the Ford side, you'd only be down a couple weeks while they get a valve body in, and they get you down the road so you can have the exact same problem in another 35,000 miles, in my opinion.
That's crazy from a layman's perspective like mine, or just, consumer perspective. Up until, maybe a few years ago, like people kind of knew that there were 10-speed issues going on, but it just felt like normal. Hey, this is just normal planned obsolescence stuff or normal General Motors issues. Whereas now, since the supply has been so bad and people are sitting waiting for 4 months sometimes for a valve body, that's really what made it such a bigger story, I think, for General Motors, which is crazy.
I
But
would
they're the
agree.
same. Yeah, that's
Yeah, they're really no better. There's a lot of part sharing. I mean, you can see it for yourself. They're almost the exact same parts. Anything Ford has done to try and differentiate their transmission by any meaningful amount from the General Motors 10L80, referencing their 10R80. Nearly 100% of that is fake news and misleading advertising, in my opinion. It's completely and totally false. And as usual, there's no journalism in the automotive industry, only entertainment and advertising. And that's why nobody seems to want to tell the truth. But that's okay. I will. I don't care. So.
We didn't go through this image yet. What the heck is this?
This looks like a 10R100 or 140 that is four-wheel drive. And if you look at the separator plate, this is the contrast between the factory separator plate in the 10R80 and all of the GM counterparts. It's this really thin steel, and it's got this black little silica bead running all around it that lays over all of the circuits to try and help it seal. The issue is that they blow out. It's super unreliable. They got this idea from their daddy, ZF. ZF does the exact same thing. And much like ZF products, the bead blows out. It ends up leaking around the separator plate. This is not an original idea. The other thing Ford is doing incorrectly here, and we actually eliminate, is they put these filters in the separator plate. Now, they would tell you that this is to minimize bore wear. There's no evidence that it has a major impact on bore wear. That's more fake news and propaganda. The reason this is because the filtration rate of these filters, how fine of a particle they're able to keep from entering the valve bore, is significantly greater than anything that would actually save the valve bore. So anything that can harm the valve bore is still going to make it through these filters. What does happen is sometimes these filters blow out, and they can trigger valves to stick and cause extreme issues. It usually takes 2 to 3 years of heat cycling before this becomes a reasonable risk. Our kit allows you to eliminate these filters for life. It's a giant scam, in my opinion. And it's another example of how Ford does not respect the people that actually spend money there. They just respect the shareholders because those are their only true customers, in my opinion. And I would encourage anybody who at the bare minimum has these filters to consider doing something to make them more reliable. I really would not trust having these things in my vehicle. I've owned vehicles with this transmission. They were engineering vehicles, and these are some of the first things to fail routinely. That's why I design products that eliminate this garbage from the valve body.
So basically what we see here, all these little black sealing areas,
yep,
those are all gone, and your plate ends up being the sealant, your thick plate.
That's all you need. That's all you need. There is no reason to use paper thin plates. Okay, it's unreliable.
Their objective, if I'm guessing right, is they save $1 or $2 on each plate, or whatever it costs. Maybe it's $10 per plate by making it thinner and then using this.
They absolutely do. This is cost cutting. If they wanted to do it correctly, they would call us. They won't call us because they're cheap. And not only are they cheap, they know that the moment these things fail outside of warranty, you get to pay for it. I tell people on a regular basis, there's more money in repairing broken vehicles than there is in selling new ones. And that's why they make vehicles that erode into nothing by the time the warranty is up. They're trying to maximize the cost of lifetime maintenance on new cars in the automotive industry. I've heard countless people say this openly in things like earnings calls. They're lying to the public, and I want everybody to know that they're lying to the public. I'm very happy to whistleblow. And everybody needs to know that these transmissions are designed specifically to fail, and I'm proving it right now. I'm walking everybody through photographic evidence of what I'm referring to, and I'm going to break it down for everybody so that anybody of any age can understand what I'm talking about. These vehicles are designed to fail. People need to know that, and I think Ford is another example of this criminal behavior, in my opinion.
It's crazy to me to think that they made a decision, like if I was a consumer, to think that overbuilding this is a couple millimeter thick plate versus what we see here. Like, if you told someone that, they'd think that was ridiculous. Like, no, that's not overbuilding it. That's just building it the right way. What you're doing. And that is now considered overbuilding in this scenario. It's
Land Rover mentality. I've been saying it. Look, I don't know how many times I have to say this for people to take me seriously. They think the customer is their financial. And they think that because in many cases they are. They buy the things. And so, as long as sales go up, people will continue to get treated this way. These companies do not respect their customers. It's never going to stop. They design things this way so that when they fail outside a warranty, they can charge you for the repair. This is absolutely intentional behavior. They know that they're going to be unreliable. They just want to sell you 40 transmissions outside a warranty. They're trying to make money off you. They're massive corporations. And keep in mind, the CEOs of these companies usually have little impact on this. In fact, they're usually useful idiots. The CEOs of these companies actually report to the board of directors. The board of directors has a monopoly on all major decision making at these companies. And the boards of directors are the most important shareholders. So the customers actually own the company. And when I say customers, I mean their only real customers, the shareholder. Any company ran by its own customers will be very, very good at serving their customers. Well, Ford is good at serving their customers. They're the shareholders.
I think it's the last image. Did we go through this one yet?
So this is an ulterior image of the Ford 10R100 or 10R140. This is the bottom half of the valve body. This one is slightly different than the smaller 10R60, 80, and 90. There's nothing major to point out here without zooming in. But a long story short, you can see all the cost cutting in the material. So if you zoom in,
porous.
It's extremely high porosity. Yes. So if you look at this, you'll see all these little like crosses and X's and stuff. The reason they're doing that is they're trying to eliminate material. So when you cast things, you pay for the amount of material you use, whereas when you CNC machine, you pay for time and material. And material is a static cost. So no matter how much material you take off, you spent the same amount on material because it's a subtractive system. Casting is an additive system. So anywhere where they can make the valve body thinner so they can use less material is obviously to their advantage. As you can see here, they clearly commissioned a bunch of people with my same profession to go through this valve body and study every area that they could make it thinner. That's what all of those awkward lines that run tantamount to the shape of the valve body are. It's just cost reducing measures, and it's making the valve body as thin as possible. And this is yet another reason that installing, steel valves and thicker plates and everything is dramatically important. This was engineered to fail when you get out of warranty. I understand some people will get good mileage out of them, and those people will be like, well, it worked for me. Good for you, man. The reality is the average person doesn't have that experience. And I'm just trying to help people understand how these things were designed to fail. And that's why preventative and reliability upgrades are so imperative on these things. It's going to get to a point where you can't fix these. I mean, they don't want you to be able to fix them now. Let me give everybody a piece of information that is very, very important. So let's talk about the 700R4, which is a General Motors transmission from decades and decades ago. Okay. You can't call the dealership and get a valve body for that thing. It's 30 effing years old. You can't do that. So the aftermarket is the only place you can get a valve body for them. So now, in order to get a 10R80 valve body, you can't get the solenoids. You have to do what's called a PUN or ton number during the remanufacturing process to truly reset everything, at least so they say. I think an adaptive reset is much more important, but Ford would tell you you have to use a PUN number or ton number, which only comes on OEM parts. Well, what happens when they don't want to sell you OEM parts? You're screwed. Look at the 2008 Ram 4500. If you need an input shaft for that, you're screwed. We just came out with one. What were people going to do before us? They'd have to try and find a used one in a junkyard somewhere. Well, how do you know that thing's not going to break? That's how they get you to buy new cars. They wait until you're about 5 to 10 years out of production, and then they just stop selling parts. And then here's the other thing they don't do. They don't license those parts to aftermarket companies after that to keep the cycle going. Usually, after a certain period of time, when they don't want to supply these parts anymore, they'll sell that license to a company like Moog or Dorman or Rostra or, whoever. They're not doing that anymore. You are not going to be able to repair these vehicles after a certain point. Prevention is the new repair because they're taking away repair. I mean, I know in a separate video, we've agreed to talk about the Powerline 8, so I won't get too deep into it. But what I will tell people, the ZF Powerline 8, mark my words, will be the first unremanufacturable transmission in the diesel industry. The only way you can remanufacture it is by buying almost everything from the dealer, and the dealer won't sell you anything. So what are you going to do? If you have a Powerline 8 right now and your truck goes down and you pass the end of the warranty period, I don't know if you've done the math, but you're talking like $16,000 to install a new OEM replacement. It's on back order. They don't sell the parts to remanufacture these. The aftermarket's not making the parts to remanufacture these. The only aftermarket company that has anything for the ZF Powerline 8 is NextGen Drivetrain, because I created a pulse delete kit for it that's out and available now. Other than us, it's a ghost town. If you have a ZF Powerline 8, you best believe if that thing fails, you're screwed for a very large amount of money.
Yeah, we're going to do a video on the 1500s and then the Powerline ZFs coming up soon, hopefully. Anything else you want to say about the GM versus Ford? I guess they're both similar enough that it makes a lot of sense to do the valve body upgrades for anybody that's wondering, or they can just, a lot of these guys, I think, are just warranty hounds. They're just keeping things through warranty and getting a new one every 2 to 3 years, and they don't care.
That is such a terrible financial decision. Can you imagine if we looked at houses that way? Well, my house is 3 years old. Let me get another one. I mean, and at least houses, you can keep it for 3 years and sell it for probably the same amount, maybe a little more in the right economy. So think of how stupid that sounds. And a house is a better decision. I'm telling people there is no reason to continue buying new cars. It's a terrible decision. And just so you know, if you're one of the people that drives these cars for 3 years, trades them in and gets a new one, the OEM knows that you're in that cycle, and they're doing everything they can to psychologically manipulate you into staying in that cycle. They want you to believe that old cars cannot do what you need and that new cars are the only ones that can. It's complete and total fake news. Whatever you do for a living, people did that 30 years ago before these new trucks existed. Okay, you're a carpenter, you're a hot shotter, whatever have you. People were doing that 30 years ago too. Okay, and they didn't have the trucks of today. You don't need today's technology and abuse and planned obsolescence to run your business. I would argue that you would bring more money home if you drove an old, reliable vehicle that had the upgrades necessary to fit your application. I really can't yell from the rooftops enough. Stop buying new cars. Whatever you have, make it reliable and drive it forever. Stop buying new cars. They are abusing you.
Well, thanks, Nate. I appreciate this on a Sunday afternoon. Hopefully everybody got the transmission 101 in their heads now.
Always here to help and educate. All right, man. Thanks.